Good afternoon, everyone, and more excitingly and more importantly, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023 and the first episode of the Uncoder in 2023. I hope everyone had a lot of time over the last few weeks to, take some time off, spend it with some loved ones, recharge the battery, and are just really ready to rev it up and get going here in the early goings of 2023. And I mean, the firemen, I don't know if you can hear right now. I know that sometimes the sounds of the city come through on these Twitches, but hopefully everything's okay. But they certainly seem like they are supercharged here in early 2023. We'll give it a second. Live broadcasting. Anyway. So yes, where was I? Welcoming you to 2023 and saying that, look, we're ready to hit the ground running, come hot out of the gates, whatever other phrases you want to use for getting a good start to something. And if my background has already tipped you off, the reason I think we're going to get off to a really good start today in 2023 is today we're going to talk about AI and AI in terms of codeless and in terms of Uncork. And, obviously it's been a hot topic, and there's a recent product release, ChatGPT, which we'll certainly be talking about in a second, which has brought more of this AI conversation to the forefront in terms of how good it's getting, in terms of how scary it is, how good it's getting, but also in terms of how many problems it still has, and that there could be inaccurate information and it might have biases to it and things like that, right? So there's a lot to be excited about of AI. There's a lot to be considerate about in terms of AI, in terms of how we use it in the best way possible, right? And, there are examples of that. I don't know if folks are familiar with the trolley problem, something that has always been a psychology problem, but something that has come into the forefront when AI comes around in terms of how do you deploy AI? Because yes, it's artificial intelligence. It's intelligent, but it's artificial. Right. And because somebody had to create that intelligence to an extent, someone had to write that algorithm to tell the intelligence, the art of the AI, how to become smarter, right? And how to look at things and so on and so forth. So, the applications of it start to get really interesting as we start to apply it more and more and more, right? There might be some times where you're using a piece of software and AI just helps you. It says, hey, do you want to, click this button now? Or maybe, hey, I bought this product, and then some kind of AI, so to speak, tells you maybe you should buy these other products as well. And I think those are safe and easy things, right? But I know that it's become a very hot button issue in terms of autonomous vehicles, for example. And going back to that trolley problem I said, and so folks who may not be familiar with that, the idea there is there's a runaway trolley going down the tracks, right? And it's on pace, it's on track to kill 5 kids, right? And then over to the right, or let's say 5 old, fine, no, so I got this backwards, at least in terms of my flavor of it. 5, elderly people, we'll say, right? Folks who've lived a good life. On the other track, where if you can, hit that switch and you can change tracks, is 1 kid, right? Fresh new life, so to speak. What do? Right? You either what does the AI needs to make a decision? It either needs to continue down the current track and, sadly enough, kill 5 people, or it can change tracks and make the decision to go kill the 1 person, right? But then how do you value life becomes a question in terms of there. Is 5 really more valuable than 1? Some people might argue that, 5 90-year-olds, well, they have a good life. I hate to see it. Let's let this 1 kid let them go live a life, right? And that's a very Western civilization way of thinking, like Western Hemisphere, Western Europe. It's a way that a lot of those folks think, is that, the elderly have had their time and the young folks need their time now, right? So maybe if an engineer from, Canada creates that software, they let it continue down the track and they let it kill those 5 people, right? It's getting morbid. But then on the flip side, you go talk to like Eastern cultures, a lot of Asian cultures, they value the wisdom and everything that the elderly bring to them, right? They have a lot of respect for their elders. A lot of wisdom is imparted in there, and they don't want to lose that wisdom. So an engineer from somewhere over there, an engineer from Vietnam or something, might go and tell the AI to flip course and go take out that 1 person, because 1 is less than 5, especially if they don't have the wisdom that the other 5 do, right? So those are things, that cultural differences, and there are studies that show how we, different societies look at age as a value in terms of a person. So depending on where the software was created, the AI might behave differently, right? So this, in terms of applying AI to different pieces of software, things can get, kind of dicey, right? But we're not going to get dicey today. My morbid trolley problem example here is the diciest that we're going to get. We're actually going to look at it from the other side of things, right? Which is you can have AI embedded into the software that you're using, that your end users are using. But more and more, we're now starting to see AI built into the developer experience. So rather than the user experience, the developer experience. How can AI help software engineers and help developers and help creators build software better, cheaper, faster, so on and so on and so on, right? So that's what we're going to focus on today. We'll talk a little bit about it with code, but then we're going to show some cool stuff about how AI can help your codeless development, okay? So with that being said, let's pop up my screen and let's walk through some stuff. So as I said, the first thing I'm just going to talk about right here is ChatGPT. So this was the product that was released by OpenAPI somewhat recently that took over social media. As far as the social media I saw, which is honestly a lot of LinkedIn. It's probably my most active social media profile. A lot of talk about ChatGPT and what it can do, and in terms of how well it can write responses to the things that you prompted. So you've probably heard about it. You've probably seen it. Just the next evolution of things that OpenAPI are working on. And if you haven't, though, let's just do a quick example, right? So this is the little playground that ChatGPT has. So if I wrote in like, what is codeless? All right, let me ask ChatGPT. Oh man, regenerate the response. Let's refresh. Little Cloudflare security thing. Maybe that was my problem. It didn't think I would secure anymore. What is codeless? Okay. Codeless refers to programming development does not require writing code in a traditional sense. Instead of writing lines of code in a programming language, codeless approaches often involve using visual interface or pre-built blocks of code to create software automated processes. This can make it easier for people with little or no coding experience to build software automate tasks. Codeless approaches are often used for tasks such as creating simple websites, automating business processes, or building simple mobile apps. Pretty good considering Uncork only recently, founded Codeless and brought it to the forefront. So great job to our marketing, comms, social teams for getting Codeless out there on the internet so that ChatGPT can go find all that and write this out for us, right? So here is what most folks have probably been playing around with when they have seen ChatGPT or things like that, right? Is like asking it a question, give it a response. I mean, people have asked it to write a story, to write a poem, right? It's a lot about language and writing and things like that. But there's other languages and spoken languages, that is. There's other languages and writing that people do all the time. Programming, right? People write code in programming languages. So organizations such as GitHub have started to leverage some of the OpenAPI models to start to suggest code. Right, so this is called Copilot. It's a product from GitHub, and some pretty cool examples down here. Right, you could say, "Hey, get the average." You says, "Hey, get the average runtime of successful runs in a second," and it generated this whole formula, this whole method function for you. Right, gave you variables, and it wrote it out in the code of your choice. Okay, that was Go. So on and so on and so on. Right, and they're embedding this into IDEs so that the developers can start to leverage some more of this. So like I write a comment, right, of what I want something to do, and then it writes the code to go do it. Right. So that's where you're starting to see it. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the logic around Codex, which is the code-focused model of OpenAPI, was actually built on top of using GitHub data. So effectively looking through public repositories, hopefully just public repositories, looking through public repositories in GitHub to look at code, understand sentiment. Hopefully, the more comments people write in their code, and I know commenting code is nothing that anybody loves to do and probably something that people don't do enough of. But if it's got a comment and it's got some code, I'm sure that helped the model a lot to understand from the code. Right. So you're starting to see this now in traditional software development with code, but that doesn't mean that we can't do it with codeless, right? And that's where we're going to get to. That's going to be the big reveal in a few minutes. So we did the same, right? We took OpenAPI's GPT-3 model. We're actually using this one called Text DaVinci 3. Now, this up here, if I go back, you see there was the codex. It's in a limited beta, so I don't know that I even was going to be able to get access to it through a personal account of OpenAPI. So I'm going with a standard GPT-3 model, which is what kind of started all of this, right? And everything is just kind of built on top of that. And we're using this Text DaVinci 003 model to do what we're about to show you, which is their most capable GPT-3 model. It can do any task that the other models can do, often with better output or higher quality, longer output, and better instruction following set, right? So we're basically going to show you how you can hook on Cork up to OpenAPI's GPT-3 and leverage the pretty amazing power that some of these GPT models have, and how we can apply that to software development. Because again, we want to focus on making that developer experience better. Right? Okay, so that's, I guess, all of my tee up to everything right now. So why don't we go and why don't I actually show you what we've built using this Text DaVinci? Okay, so I'm going to jump over and we're going to talk to Corky, which is probably a name that we're going to throw out, but it was one that I don't know. I just felt like it would have been fun to put in there, right? We're going to ask Corky to build something, right? We're just going to tell it what we want it to build. And you can see we've got examples of the types of things that you can tell it to build, right? So let's just, actually, and then I have my placeholder text here says the app of my dreams. All right. So why don't we actually just start there? The app of my dreams. We want Corky to build me the app of my dreams. And it's going to work. The model's not the fastest model in the world. It does say it's super fast, but maybe, the extent of what we're leveraging it for is not its strong suit. And here we go. Well, it's an app, right? So you're going to give it a name, a description. You're going to choose which platform it runs on, what its features, and where's the target audience, right? So here is a description of the app of your dreams. Okay. What else can we do? So why don't we take some of these examples? Why don't we try a movie database? That one was a fun one, right? So you can just ask it for the thing that we want, whether it's the app of your dreams or a movie database, or maybe a movie database is the app of your dreams. I don't know. A lot of movie fans, you probably just go on Netflix now. It's effectively, or IMDb. I mean, you don't need to build, you don't need to roll your own movie database when you got IMDb, right? But here it is, right? It's given me back basically the fields and the attributes I would need to capture data about movies to put into my movie database, right? So it's going to ask you for the title, the release year, the genre. Now, this is something I think is super cool. It actually filled out the genres, right? It knew that there are n number of genres. And of course, it's not every genre that you can probably imagine, but GPT knew. OpenAPI, like it knew that I'm asking about a movie. A movie has a property called a genre, and a genre is typically within this list of options, right? That's really cool stuff. Ratings, out of a 10. And I'll try to type in, I'm trying to type letters here and it's not working, right? It even was able to make sure that the rating was a number and a description about like, okay, what's the movie about, right? So you can ask for very specific things that you want, or just generic, I guess. Sorry, I should call that generic. Generically, what do I generally want, right? And boom, there you go. This is actually a working, again, Uncork thing, right? It's even got validation. If I don't type it in, it says it has to be required. Again, the year also needs to be a valid number, right? That's the commas. That's a number though, right? So here we go. So like that, now you've got all these working Uncork components based on about movies. Right? Let's try something else. Let's just be really specific with it, right? Let's say, okay, well, I know what the form is that I'm going to build. I know the app is that I'm going to build, and I want to collect fields, but I don't necessarily maybe want to go back into the back end of Uncork and drop in all of these fields and name them. And what if I just say, hey, I want a text. I want text for a street address, a drop down for a state, and radio buttons for apartment or house. All right, let's see what happens there. Obviously, I know it's going to work because these are my examples. At least I assume they still will work. Right. And again, it's still going to churn. It's still got to figure out what it wants here. And there we go. Right. So there's a text field for street address, a state. Once again, just as smart as it was for talking about the movies and knowing the genres. I asked for a state. It knew it was in the context of an address. And it gave me back all the abbreviations for all the states, right? As well as a radio button for apartment and residence. I'll just use this other one, fields for first name, last name, date of birth, and email also. Just pull that one up. Let that work, right? Similar, first name, last name, date of birth, is a a calendar. Although as nice as date of birth being a calendar is, have you ever tried to pick your date of birth on one of these calendars? If it doesn't have like, it's actually a kind of a pain in the butt here. I got to go 2013, then I got to go 2003. Wow, I'm dating myself in terms of how many decades back I need to go to even get to my year of birth. Ooh, not there yet. But right, so maybe a day picker is not the best way to put your date of birth is, but bottom line is it knows it's a date, right? And of course, this knows it's an email as well. Cool. So I can ask for very specific things, and at the end, I'm not just going to get back a bunch of text fields. I'm going to get back type specific fields with validation, all just by saying this is what I want, right? I don't need to, I don't need to go in and I don't need to pick the right component. I don't need to configure the component a certain way. All I do is say that that's what I want, right? And we know it now. Right. And then the last example I'm just going to show the front end is HTML, right? So HTML is basically what this is, right? The markup language that lays out your content on the internet, right? Or on a web page, right? It's all built in HTML. If you don't believe me, there's a bunch of HTML, right? If I come over here, and I inspect, there's a bunch of HTML, right? HTML, hypertext markup, right? So why don't I just put in HTML? So here it is. I just wrote some HTML. That these are just some input fields written in HTML. And I'm going to say I want build me this in Uncork. And there it is, right? There is what I just said built into Uncork. A first name field that's required, right? A text field that's last name. An email field that's email. A password field that's password, right? A date of birth field that's a date field. A tell field. Now they have these specific types. Input type tell. Boom, we got a phone number. We got another number that was a salary, a state that was a drop down. I specifically gave it the states, right? I even gave it I sent it a select element with options, and I was able to get that back, right? And then a checkbox to say whether or not I want to opt in. Right. So you can even just send it some existing HTML code and get the codeless definition out the other end, right? Because that's all this is, really. It's the codeless definition, right? That thing that we've talked about a lot on this Twitch about how Uncork is powered, the JSON documents under the covers that describes the documentation effectively. That's what this is, right? So give me HTML, I'll give you back the codeless JSON. You never need to worry about that HTML ever again. You just need to worry about the declarative JSON that's going to represent that, right? So let's just go back to the movie database. That's my most fun one here. Oh, wait, actually, I have another one, whatever. I'll just leave it in the movie database because what I want to show is I want to show the next step, which is build the app, right? So now that I've got the screen, I want to go ahead and I want to build the application. And I want to make sure that it works. I did not test that my build app button was still working before this. Was probably not a great idea. But we're gonna test it again here. I'm going to keep my network open to make sure that nothing breaks here. Plug completion. There it is. And I'm going to hit build app. Oh, boom. There it is. All right. I don't know what went wrong the first time, but here it is, right? And now we've got this, what we just saw over here, dynamically refreshed. I'm going to use the term dynamic refresh. It's a feature that's going live, which we have talked about on a previous Twitch, but you can now update specific sections of a page within Uncork, however, by just generating the JSON or just getting whatever JSON you want and shoving it in there. So that's how I was dynamically swapping out the contents of the page over here. However, in this case, I then hit a build app button, which then took the page that I had here and built a module out of it, right? Based on that codeless definition. I can preview that module. I can fill it out. So let's call it the Big Lebowski, right? You think, the Lebowski. The Big Lebowski came out, I don't know, 95 maybe. It's pretty darn funny. It's a solid 10. Best movie ever. Submit. And boom, I've now just saved this movie into my movie database, right? Don't believe me? UAPI There it is, right? So I have a working app. I just asked for, now I have a movie database. Here it is. Here's all my movies, right? It's done. I just told Corky to build me a movie database, and bam, I have a movie database just like that. Done. Right? So think about what you could do with that, right? Just if you're just someone who just, anyone can just type what they want, and then you give them the app that they need, or at least the starting point. I mean, maybe you want to add a couple other genres, like go for it, add some more genres, do whatever you want, right? Build on top of the starting point and let AI, kind of get you going, just as you come to Uncork to get yourself going faster in your projects and not worry about setting up infrastructure and everything like that. Well, you can come to Uncork AI and even get started with your application development very quickly. Okay, so that's the full terms of the demo in terms of what we were able to build. I don't know if anyone in the chat has any suggestions of other things that we can build, but if you do, throw it in there, and if I see it, I'll come back and I'll do it later. But as we're waiting to see if anyone wants to, and a lot of people tried to fool Corky, and don't get me wrong, not every single thing that I've ever typed into this box results in an app. So there definitely have error handling here. Maybe you'll find a way to stump it. But if you have any thoughts, throw it up there. I'll throw it into the bot, so to speak. But as you're kind of thinking of the Corky stumper, let's talk a little bit about like what's actually going on here, right? And it's very, very simple. It's really only three. Well, I don't want to say it's only three modules going on, right? Because we're leveraging a lot of other existing work that we've shown before. I mean, we've shown on this Twitch before, taking a table from an object from Salesforce and plugging it into, and automatically having it appear and on Cork at a click of a button, and then having that render in Slack, right? So everything that we did to make that possible is what we leveraged to make this possible as well, right? Because that's just a kind of a very general purpose transformation framework that was built to allow us to transform different representations of data and business rules and so on and so forth into the codeless definition. So what ends up, in the end, that was all that was needed here. It was taking some representation of an app that we get back from OpenAPI, we get back from one of these models, and turning it into the codeless definition, right? So actually, what's happening here is whatever you type in this box, I am prepending, and this is giving away the secrets, so consider yourself a privileged audience. I won't tell this to everything that's going up on the internet for the end of time. I won't be telling everybody this in all the demos I'm ever going to do with this, because I'm sure there's going to be many more. Actually, there definitely will be. Check out Coffee and No Code. I'll be with Gary Hober and CEO next week. I think it's going to be planned for next week. Coffee No Code on LinkedIn, where we're going to be talking about this again. And then there, probably won't give away the same secrets that I'm going to give away right here. But which is what we actually did to make this model give us back something that we could transform into the codeless definition, right? And it really just goes back to JSON, and just showing again. And I think that kind of reiterates why, JSON's such a darn good choice for how you would want to represent all the various aspects of an application that you've built, right? And it's just sitting in this calculator right here. So I'm going to take whatever it is that you type into this box, and I'm just prepending it right now. And just FYI, if you think this is like a cheap way to do it, this whole thing took a couple days, right? And I've tweaked it and I've made it like better and better and better. But to actually get it working was hours. To get it working with error handling and stuff like that was a couple days. And then there's been constant tweaks to make it just look and feel nicer since then. Try a bunch of different things, experiment with other things, which I'll talk about once I kind of go through how it all works. But the bottom line is this wasn't really that hard to do, which I think says a lot about the power of these GPT models and also the power of Uncork, right? That I could basically build an AI that produces a working application in almost no time, right? And this is the secret to it, or one of the secrets to it is, all I'm really doing right now is I'm taking whatever you tell me and I'm prepending that before I send it over to, it says create a JSON file for a form with, right? Because since I knew that GPT was very well aware of, programming languages through the things like it's done in GitHub Pilot, I had a pretty good idea if they knew that, all right, well, if GPT can write Python, it could probably write JSON, right? Like if you can do Python, if you can do these really high level languages, you should probably be able to do just a standard, a document format effectively, right? So I just asked back for some JSON, right? So if we actually jump back over to here, create, this is what I would have typed. I typed a movie database in there, and it said create a JSON file for a form with, right? So this is the full thing. And let me actually send it to ChatGPT because they have a pretty cool interface. So this is what it's doing. Oh, okay, interesting. So this is not. So this is going to be a fun one. So this is actually not. I'm showing this right now because I tested this earlier, and it actually gave me back exactly what I wanted to show you, which was more or less exactly what the model that we're using gives us back, which is effectively a JSON file, as you're seeing right now. But rather than having an array of movies here, which hopefully it just stops after a while. Don't go to part 3. No one wants to go to Godfather Part 3. Right? If you do go to Godfather Part 3, please, don't give it such a high rating, right? But either way, it didn't give me back this, and let's go create a JSON. So I'll try another one, right? Let me try this one. Let's see what ChatGPT create a JSON file for a form with. Let's see if it does a better job and shows me what I want to show you. If not, I'll go into some of our logging tools and show you what. Here's an example of a JSON file for a form of fields and first name, last name, date of birth, and email. Oh man, see, this is why we're not using ChatGPT. We're using the better one, the one that's more focused, more aware of code and stuff. But either way, but it's not even about using ChatGPT, right? And the reason I forgot why I said, oh, this is a good thing that I haven't shown you that it's showing me the wrong thing, right? Is because one of the things that we were playing around with when trying to get it to return what we want is temperature. Okay, so this is a concept. Actually, let me go to the quick start tutorial, right? It's the concept that they teach you about adjusting your setting here in the temperature, where it says if you give it a temperature of 0, a given prompt will almost always give you back the exact same response, right? Because it's like, hey, I want to be really, really safe here. And if you tell me that I want, if you tell me the certain thing, always give me the same response, right? So no matter how many times I click it, right? If I go temperature 0 here, and I keep hitting submit, it's going to keep giving me, or it should at least keep giving me, Super Stallion, Mighty Mare, Magnificent, Equine, right? I'll do it again. Same thing. Now I jump my temperature up to 1. And now I'm starting to get different ones, right? So this is a setting that you can tell the model when you're giving it a prompt, how risky or how, hot in terms of temperature, I guess, how hot of a take you want their response to be. For what I showed you, using temperature of 0 right now and just being very consistent because I want very structured data back. I don't want tons of different types of JSON documents. I want more or less as consistent of a structure as it can give me back, right? But what it basically gave me back was some JSON that described it, right? So if I come over here and I'll go into service logs, and I'll go find one of the ones I just did, right? Oh, actually, let me go to this. It would have been the completions API, right? And then let me filter down for that. Right? And then I said with a movie database, right? And this is what it gave me back. And it's hard to read here, but it said there's a form property, and inside of that, it's a title. And then there's a fields property where the name is the title and the type is text and the label is movie title and required is true, and name is release year and type is number, label is release year, required is true, so on and so forth, right? So this actually looks fairly similar to the codeless definition, not as full featured, right? But some of those base properties that you're typically used to seeing in everything. Give it a property ID, give it a label. Is it required, right? So it's giving me back this kind of thing, this response effectively, which then we just have to transform into the uncork codeless definition. And voila, you have a working app. And then when you hit build app, it effectively does the same thing again and auto creates that module, just as we've shown you in the past before. So just like that, using using a kind of a sneaky little prompt with the create a JSON file for a form with fields, you can get back almost anything you want, right? Now that's pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. I hope you think it's pretty cool too, like building out apps on the fly. There was one, it was like a Star Wars database, I think was the other one I was going to type in, which is fun for all, nerds like me out there. So hopefully you can start to, I mean, I'm going to tell you like maybe some of the potential here, right? The species, the gender, the planet, all right. The affiliation, Jedi, Sith, Rebel Alliance, Galactic Empire, like pretty good. So you can do a lot of cool stuff, right? So like where this is days worth of work, right? Like without serious investment. So you can imagine that if, with some investment into this, what we can do for the Uncork experience for you, everything from building entire apps based on things you ask and getting even smarter, right? So like one thing you'll obviously notice here, if you're familiar with Uncork, what you're not seeing is build me a data workflow. Wouldn't everyone love that if you could say, hey, Corky, build me a data workflow to turn this data into this data, right? Build me a calculator, build me a decision, build me, a plugin, right? Some of those components which are not visual in nature, not standard HTML elements around the internet, just elements, things that are more Uncork specific, but things that are still structured, right? And that's where we want to go, is at least where I'd like to go, is to start to have it to create more and more of the Uncork specific, more complex logic components, right? And that's not impossible, because there's this concept here called fine tuning, right? Now we're just using for this example, one of the general purpose models. I think I showed it to you earlier. It was called the Text DaVinci 3, right? It's just it's a catch-all, model, right? But it doesn't understand anything about Uncork, because if all of the code that it got was in GitHub and no one's storing Uncork JSON in GitHub. Not saying you couldn't store Uncork JSON in GitHub if you wanted to. We actually do have examples of that, but of course not public GitHub, right? So it doesn't necessarily understand our code to specification. But the more that we publish it, the more that people put things out there with it, then maybe it will organically get smarter and smarter about it. But we don't need to wait for that time to come. We could effectively fork one of these models and fine tune it to our specification, so where you actually, it's fine tuning, another term for training. You've probably heard and train the model a lot in terms of AI, right? So basically would be a way where, hey, we understand, again, that structured, consistent JSON for these applications. We can start to say, all right, well, it told us that this is what a movie application looks like, right? But maybe we think movie applications should look a little bit different. Well, we give it a prompt. Sorry, this is a Star Wars database I have up here right now. So maybe when you give it the prompt, you then tell it what you want the response to be, or what a good response would be, or examples of what good responses will be. And so, in fact, again, training and training and training. So now I could, if we type in here, hey, build me a calculator, right? If I said build me a calculator, one of Uncork's components, if I say build me a calculator, do you think it's going to build an Uncork calculator component, or do you think it's going to try to build a calculator? Like one that you now just have on your phone, but I don't think it's going to build a good old TI-83, but let's see what it does build, right? It's going to probably build the latter. If anything, maybe this will be the one time during this Twitch that I break it. But regardless of what it sends back, it's not going to be an Uncork calculator, right? And if I said data workflow, it's probably going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. What is a data workflow? And then you point them to a community, and then they'll learn everything you need to know about a data workflow. But as you can see, once we start to train it on some more of those Uncork concepts, and it almost works already in some sense. What does it got here? Number one, number two, in operation, right? So again, it thought about it from a calculator, but there's no logic, right? Wouldn't it be cool if it also built the Uncork calculator that would take number one, number two, and whatever operator you provided here and do the math? I guess you might need a decision to, right? But we need a decision and a calculator here, to say, depending on the operation, run a different formula, call a different calculator, depending on how you want to architect it, right? So how can we take this type of logic and automate that, where it's like, well, I want this field and this field, and then I want to do this with these fields via calculator. And I almost got there with one. And actually, let me see if it'll work. Give me 1 second if I can just find the sample text that I gave. All right. So I tried this one at one point. A first name and a last name field and a calculator field that takes them as inputs and concatenates them with Excel. Okay. I'm going to push that. Let's see what happens here. Because I did have something pretty fancy here. Or again, I'm not taking a lot of credit for this. All right. Let's say Nick Gamble. Oh, look at that. Do you see what just happened here? Begin, end, full name, begin, end, full name, begin, end, full name. That means that it worked, right? Because now in my data, I don't have another field here. I have a property, though, called full name, right? Which is a concatenation of Nick and Gamble. Okay. Now, what we'd love is to make it smart enough. And let me actually just show you, since we have the service logs, let me show you what that one actually looked like here, right? So, and I'm just going to do? I'm going to do this. Make it easier to read because this one will be interesting. Oh, well, this is all stringified, right? But what it did, it said, okay, well, then there's going to be a new field called full name. It was smart enough to even know that if you concatenate, because I don't think I told it that, right? Inputs and concatenates them. I didn't tell them to name it full name, but it knows that a first name plus a last name is a full name, right? That's cool. So it gave me a full name. It said the type was a calculator, right? The label was full name. The inputs were first name and last name. And the calculation was concatenate, because if it can write Python, it can write Excel, right? So concatenate first name with last name together. And that's what it's doing. It's actually, now, again, we can make this smarter and say, all right, well, then we also want a field called full name, and we want to show that field on the page, and maybe we want to make it disabled or read only or something to that effect, right? Like, you could see how the end result could be better, but the bottom line is it even works with calculations today, right? So as we continue to fine tune, or start, I should say, we have not started fine tuning, but as we fine tune these models, you could do a whole ton with this, and like I personally think the possibilities are endless. So this is this is my first time talking about it publicly, showing some folks around the company. But we're going to talk about it a lot more. So we're currently working on a landing page on Uncork's website where you can try this for free. Basically, I'm logged in, but we've got it, so you don't need to be logged in. You won't be able to build the app on our website, but you will be able to generate the app, so you can again try to trick Corky and so on and so forth. And then we'll be again coffee and no code next week, and probably more on the subject coming up. And then who knows, if we decide to invest in this, maybe even some more exciting product features down the line, in terms of embedding AI more and more into the developer experience in Uncork. So that's it. I think, like I said, I hope this was a cool, fun, different way to start the 2023 schedule of the Uncoder. So, like I said, stay tuned for Coffee No Code. Look on LinkedIn for when that gets posted and when that's going to be. And then we'll also be sharing a link to uncork.com where you can play around with it yourself. So thank you all. Happy New Year again. I hope it's off to a great start, and you're excited about what's going to come in 2023 for yourselves and everyone around you. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.